Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the workshop for the Lee County Board of County Commissioners. It is March 7th, 2023, and I've got 1:31 as the time. Let's go ahead and recognize our county manager for some opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's all good. Commissioners, you've asked for a 6-month update on all of the activities that have taken place since the passing of Hurricane Ian. Everybody knows, got the date burned indelibly into their mind of September 28th, 2022. And what we'd like to talk with you about today is where we've been, where we are today, and sort of where we're headed. I think one of the things that's really important about today is what we'd like to demonstrate for you is that life is not really back to normal for a lot of people in Lee County, but for some it is. Depending on where you are in Lee County, the people walk out in their front yard, or they've got services that are just as they were pre-storm, and so it's real easy for some of the residents, property owners, or for us from time to time. It's easy to lose sight of the fact that Fort Myers Beach was decimated, and it's going to take a long time to rebuild. The city of Sanibel Island, the same. Pine Island, which is an unincorporated area. And then there are places, as you start to come upriver, in North Fort Myers and elsewhere, that may have traditionally flooded during particularly heavy rainy season that have experienced incredible damage. So what we'd like to show you today is a demonstration of where we were, where we are, where we're going, some of the immediate priorities, and why these priorities are in the order that they exist, and then operational updates from each of the departments where we have major activity going on. So with your permission, I'll turn it over to Deputy County Manager Dave Harner to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Roger. I think we're going to go straight into the video.
Hurricane Ian made landfall in Lee County on September 28, 2022 as a Category 4 with wind speeds of 155 miles an hour. As soon as it was evident that Ian was going to make a direct hit to Lee County, our team, along with our state and federal partners, were working actively on the response and our recovery efforts. The damage sustained was immense, and we have a long road to recovery.
Commissioner, what we're going to do next is we're going to go into each department and a specific area of what happened and give you a lowdown of where we are and where we are going. So I'll start off with Glenn and debris.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Commissioners, you have monitored the debris cleanup situation closely all through our response, but to recap, around 12 million cubic yards of material have been collected countywide, and Lee County collected half of that within the unincorporated areas alone. To put that in perspective, that is 3.5 times the amount of debris that we cleaned up after Hurricane Irma, and we did it in the same amount of time. And so that's a real testament to the work of our solid waste department, and really their preparation in getting the debris management sites ready, coordinating with the vendors, and a big thanks, of course, to Crowder Golf and Thompson Consulting, who every step of the way have just done great work. And of course, Haggerty in the background helping us with authorizations so that we could go pick up some of that commercial debris that typically is a responsibility of the property owner, but that you all decided we should work on, and we've done successfully. So thanks to all of them. If we can go back, can we go back to the previous slide? The bottom bar chart there, call your attention to that, because this shows our final disposal volume with the stuff that we have collected, unincorporated Lee County. The red bars show what went to Gulf Coast landfill. And we point this out because obviously that was a big decision to make, but it has helped us incredibly. You can look at how fast the response increased once we were able to start using the Gulf Coast landfill for final disposal. I'll point out that we expect to be done with Lee County materials in mid-April. PPDR and waterway cleanup, but it will be very little material compared to what's already gone there. And then as we look at the next range of pictures here, nothing that you haven't seen before, just a reminder that March 1st was the final set-out deadline for all storm debris countywide. The solid waste team has created punch lists that Crowder Golf and Thompson Consulting are working through now. We expect to have the right-of-way work completely done by March 29th, which was the original FEMA deadline. We'll have some material processing and haul out after that, but we will have wrapped up this operation in April and close it out. And so the only other thing I would say, just going forward, keep in mind that system volume is up. After Irma, we experienced an increase in volume that never subsided. We expect that the same thing is going to happen here. Clearly, we'll have roofing material for years, but we'll also have ongoing reconstruction efforts for quite a while. And so we see increased volume system-wide and expect that to continue for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Glenn, real quick, I have a question. Two parts of the question. So, like, even today this morning, I was contacted by some haulers that were trying to go to the waste disposal location on Church Street, and they're spending basically the whole day of just driving there. And once they get there, they're in line for hours. They drop their roof material. Is there any? Are we looking at any way to expedite that to increase more flow out there at those landfills, and that for dumping the debris?
Yeah, well, we definitely, there's a number of private contractors, facilities that roofers can go to. They can go to our Buckingham facility, but we're incentivizing them to go to the Lee Henry County landfill. Okay. Is that, are you asking?
Church Street, is that where, I'm not sure if Doug's here.
Maybe Doug can help us with that specific location.
Which location is that with a Church Street? And I know I already sent something last month to Roger, Glenn, and Doug about the other landfill in Henry County, creating more exposure with some safety issues out there. Doug, go ahead.
The Church Road site is our Lee Hendry landfill. Okay. We are taking the great majority of shingles out there. We have a bypass lane for essentially non-contractors like our own trucks to reduce the lines. In addition, we have plans right now to add a second scale because, as Glenn pointed out, we do expect shingles to continue for years.
Yeah, when was that second scale coming online? That was another question we're asking. So they're out there, the private contractor, but they're spending basically half a day in line to dump. So we want them to do that. We don't want to go somewhere else and dump somewhere illegally, but we don't want to spend a half a day there just to dump.
Yes, sir, and I can get you the statistics on it because we do try. I don't have them with me, but we do track the turn time on all those vehicles, so we can get that. Again, is that we do accept shingles at our Buckingham facility also at the end of the day for contracted work.
So they can go to Buckingham at the end of the day with shingles?
They can go end of the day, yes, sir, between 4 and 6.
Okay, and the next thing, the landfill that we reopened, the Gulf Coast landfill, you said we'll be done with it by April, and Cape Coral will be using it. When will it be completely done and sealed? That's while the residents are asking for that date now. They see the slowdown, so a lot of the residents around the area are asking when that landfill will be closed again and resealed.
Commissioner, of course, Doug has been monitoring that very closely and working with Waste Management. I think the answer is that the state does need to continue to use it for some time. We anticipate that the 18-month estimate we gave you from when it started to finish will hold. There really isn't a lot of material in terms of quantity that's left for the state to pick up.
Right now they're complaining about the dust coming from the piles that were there before, so just asking.
Well, and you did set some timelines for ultimate closure once a state of local emergency has ended. They can only collect material for another 30 days and they have to be done, so.
Okay, but I knew it was 18 months, but so we're still basically 14 months out basically from that closing date, but just didn't know if we anticipate anything close sooner than that.
Doug, do you want to?
Sir, first, if I can, is that the dust issue is a real one several weeks ago. So what Waste Management has done is they've moved their operations back away from the edge. I observed that last week, the change in operations. I was out there with Ms. Brocky, and we did observe that. They also had 3 water trucks running at the time. The timing on shutting down is that we don't expect to take any material in there until April 15th, after April 15th, as stated. And then the state, I've asked the state when they expect to stop taking material in there after that. And when I have an answer from the state, I'll get with everyone on that. There's very little material left to take into the site.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
While no one seeks out a hurricane, I feel a strong sense of accomplishment and a strong sense of helping my neighbors working through this tremendous challenge that we have in the county of debris collection.
It's been a unit. It's been a team effort with a lot of dedication, long hours, but ultimately we can see that visual progress, and that visual progress is what continues to give everyone the initiative to put in those hours.
Being a part of the cleanup process, I really enjoy it because I get to help people every single day. It makes me feel like we're really accomplishing something big here.
This hurricane is like no other. The devastation, seeing people's lives at the curb. It's nice knowing that I'm being helpful in some kind of way, at least so they can get back to some kind of normality.
Being able to be there and coordinating the debris to help residents rebuild and restore their lives, it means everything to me.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Before I delve into this slide, I did want to make mention that all of these data points you see are courtesy of our partners at FEMA and are self-reported as of March 1st. Since the storm landed, over 58,000 Lee County residents have had, at some point, needed to relocate to some short-term housing of some sort. Of that number, 223 are participants of FEMA's transitional sheltering program in hotels across the state. We refer to it as TSA. 40 of those residents are located in Lee County hotels. I think it's important to mention that this program is set to expire on March 28th. However, the county, with the chair's signature, did put a request in for an extension of 60 days. This will provide our case managers some additional time to identify permanent housing solutions for those folks. With that said, we still have close to 4,000 residents still looking for an immediate housing solution. So it was an issue at the time the storm hit, as well as well beyond that. We're 6 months in, still folks looking for residents, permanent solutions. On a positive note, over 132,000 residents impacted by the storm have returned to their home or found an alternate permanent housing solution. So it's been a slow process, but progress is being made. This next slide kind of displays a timeline for all the various housing programs that are available to our residents. You will note programs such as the U.S. Army Corps' Blue TARP program, SBA's home disaster loans, FEMA's TSA program I just mentioned, and FDEM's non-congregate sheltering, launched immediately after storm's landing and typically run for about 6 months. They are short-term. A majority of FEMA's individual assistance programs continue on for 18 to 24 months. There's some longer-term programs such as FEMA's HMGP program, as well as HUD's Community Development Block Grants. So those are rolling out now and obviously run for a longer time than some of the more immediate programs. The Florida Housing Finance Corporation's programs, which include SHIP-DR as well as HHRP, run for up to 36 months. And I think the takeaway on this slide is this assistance is going to be around for some time, longer than 5 years. So we got to keep that in mind. So we mentioned a few of the federal housing programs. Here's some numbers again from FEMA and FDEM, since they sponsored a bulk of the federal and state programs that were made available to our residents. These are all of, as of March 1st, 206 are currently in temporary FEMA housing. As the previous slide suggests, these direct housing programs are available for up to about 18 months after storm landfall. Additional 22,248 households have been approved for rental assistance, and this has posed a challenge for residents here locally. They are provided market rate rent, but because of our low rental inventory, a majority of these folks are finding themselves using the funds for hotel stays. On the FDEM side, they've identified 672 eligible households, and they currently have 149 in temporary housing. Those are primarily the travel trailers you see depicted here on this slide. One of the great things about this program is they were allowed to place these in the floodplain where FEMA's program didn't permit that. So on to local housing programs. Kudos to our team in DCD as well as Human Services, taking a look at our current programs and identifying ways that we could build capacity within them. So they prioritized funding for several standing housing programs. They took current year funds and reprogrammed and took additional allocations from the state and federal agencies, expanded program capacity for storm-impacted residents. And to date, Lee County has assisted 29 households with rehabbing their hurricane-damaged homes, supported 138 households with past due rent and mortgage payments, approved 197 applications for insurance deductible assistance, and provided rapid rehousing case management for hundreds of residents. We anticipate these numbers, sir, will continue to grow as more state and federal funding becomes available for these programs. Next slide displays the funding that we've received here locally. $5.4 million was allocated this past January by the Florida Housing Finance Corporation via the Hurricane Housing Recovery Program, or HHRP. These funds are used to support several Lee County low to very low income housing programs, which included acquisition and rehab, owner-occupied rehab and repair, and new home down payment assistance. An additional $2.5 million in SHIP funds were allocated this past October for the insurance deductible assistance program. This program provides up to $10,000 in assistance to low to moderate income residents. And if we go back to that one, I just want to touch on planning, the section off to the right here. In a quick look forward, the county has completed or currently working on several planning activities, including the draft of a housing strategy plan, which lays out the county administered programs and potential funding. We've entered into an agreement to exchange housing data with FEMA, which ensures that we are able to meet housing needs for residents that are still unmet. We have developed or in development of plans to process for volunteer housing needs. And lastly, an updating of the local housing assistance plan, which is a requirement of the SHIP program.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We're going to transition into transportation now. I think you're very familiar with a number of these numbers that are up here. The one I like to delve into a little bit is the drainage canals. We currently have 38 of 66 cleared. We do not have a time frame on when we will be complete with all our drainage canals because we continue to add canals as we go through this process, specifically for water flow to ensure and flooding issues. So we will continue to assess and address and add canals onto this list to ensure we have water flow. The rest of the numbers we'll delve into as we go per slide, so we'll get into that next.
Real quick, Dave, before
Yes.
we leave that one, on the canals, is that agency that we had talked about previously that was in the federal government that we needed to deny our request? Or is that a different?
That's different, that's specific to San Carlos. These canals are DOT canals that we're currently working through.
Okay, sounds good. And then, real quickly, the one thing that I did want us to look at as we kind of take away from transportation is if there's any way we could delve into whether we could fix some things on the traffic lights, traffic signals that were damaged. 6 months later, driving around the county, seeing really crooked traffic lights and things like that still, if there's a way that we could get away with making some temporary repairs and not risk our FEMA reimbursement, I'd like to do that. I can't believe that FEMA would be so inflexible. I mean, it sounds like they are, but I'm really surprised that FEMA is so inflexible. They wouldn't let us straighten some lights so that way we can at least have safe operating conditions while we await the inspections. And I guess it's probably Federal Highway Safety, not FEMA, but either way, whatever agency it is, I'd love to know what we can do to work on that.
Well, throughout this presentation, I'll show you some areas that we have done this, some areas where we do not meet the thresholds for reimbursement, that we're going ahead and doing that work. So I'll address all those as we go through, but we have two funding mechanisms. We have FEMA and we have Federal Highway. With FEMA, we can do some work, and we are, and I'll show you those numbers in a few minutes. Federal Highway, we can't, and we're working through that process now, but I'll address that as we go through.
Okay.
So on bridge damage, we had 9 bridges damaged. I think everybody's familiar with the damages that we had, specifically with Matlacha and Sanibel. We had the major washouts of those 2 areas. We also had, in every damaged bridge, we had approach slab damage. So all those bridges had approach slab failure. They are all now fixed. We had some of the big ones that we were talking about that were closed for a period of time were between Bonita and Fort Myers Beach, and those are the Hickory bridges. So New Pass, Little Carlos, and Big Hickory are now all open again. But we have asked for appropriations for a PD&E study, and all these projects are in Tier 1. So we are moving forward with that. Big Carlos was already designed and bid. So on February 21st, the board approved Superior to move forward with that project. So all those road projects are moving forward. With Sanibel, we also went to the board on February 21st for those additional costs, which were roughly $52 million. We'll be coming back to you for Matlacha. We still do not have the complete numbers from the state at this point in time, but as soon as we have that, we'll bring that information back. Roadway washouts, again, we had a number of those. We just talked about Sanibel, Bridge, Causeway, and Matlacha. We also had McGregor, the approach as you go into the tolls on Sanibel that was washed out. The state did the temporary work there, and they're working on the permanent fix as well through that initial approval that the board gave us for the $52 million. Hickory Boulevard also had major washout during the storm. Our crews were out there immediately following the storm. So 2 days after the storm, we had the temporary fixes in. And then 2 weeks later, we had the permanent fix for Hickory Boulevard. Estero Boulevard, we hired a number of consultants to provide damage assessments, which we have already sent off to FDOT and Federal Highway. We have a plan and are waiting for Federal Highway approval for this. We've also asked for appropriations for the clean out of the drainage system. So that is a major issue that we have going, and I believe, Glenn, that number $6 million? I can't remember the number.
For the waterway?
For the drainage system on
21.5 million.
21.5 million. So we also asked for that. That's roadway washouts. Bridge and roadway repair, we just essentially discussed that, what's happening with Sanibel and Matlacha. Some of the other roads that we've already repaired. So Commissioner Hammond, you had asked about signals. This is a lot of good information here of what we're able to do, what we've been able to do in the short term. Out of 447 signals that we have, 400 were damaged countywide. We hired 4 consultants to complete signal damage assessments all around the county. 132 signals currently are not reimbursable. They fall under that threshold of $5,000. So currently we have 50% of those signals, the work is done, they're up. We will be complete with the rest of those 132 signals before June. All left-hand turns will be completed by mid-March. When we initially did emergency repairs, it did not allow us to do turn signals. Federal Highway changed their opinion on this and allowed us to do that. We also have done an extensive work around schools. So we work very closely with the school district to ensure that the children are safe, whether it's crosswalks, stop signs, street lights. We've done that at our own cost. The signal cabinets, we had 42 that were damaged due to saltwater intrusion. We were able to get those back up on temporarily. The problem with that is Federal Highway will now not allow us to replace those because they're working. We have a 2-year window with Federal Highway that if any of these signal cabinets fail, we can get reimbursed through the process through Federal Highway. We are and have ordered additional signal cabinets to allow us not to have a major light or signal down, that we can work on it rapidly. And just to give you an idea of some of the time constraints or the time frame that we have, we just went to the board prior to Irma, June 21st, for a Lehigh mast arm that was related to Hurricane Irma. And the reason why is we have to do ADA. Once we get into these things with the federal government, we have to do ADA improvements, structural analysis, cost estimates, and a repair plan. So it does take time for these major issues, but the lights are safe. We just ultimately will have to replace the mast arm, and that does take a period of time, and you can tell we just did that in 21. When it comes to signs and signals, we have 2 components here. We have Federal Highway, which is any federal road that receives federal aid, and then we have FEMA, which is our local roads. So right now, we have submitted a public interest funding document to Federal Highway. And the reason we did this is this will allow us to do the work in-house and make things happen a lot quicker once it's approved. Again, the difference with FEMA is we can document with FEMA and move. Federal Highway, we have to get approval. But this public interest document will allow us to move quicker and do the work in-house once approved. So we're working on that process now. That cost, if we do not do it in-house, is roughly $370,000. It'll be dramatically cheaper if we do the work in-house. With FEMA, again, these are local roads. Everything is under 100K. If it's under 100K, we were able to go ahead and start doing the work in-house, which is what we are doing, and that is all reimbursable. So we have 6,647 signs that we will be done in the next 2 weeks, and that'll be reimbursable by FEMA. The rest of the signs, which we have 13,467 signs that need to be repaired around the county. What we were able to do is we were able to do the critical signage. So the number of signs that are completed right now are 9,947. That was our stop signs and our speed limit signs. That's critical. They allowed us to put those up. We've also had discussions about the overhead signage. That was already out to bid. That work is taking place, specifically those signs that lead into our toll plazas. All that is happening within this year. Obviously, it was delayed based on the storm, but this year we will have all that overhead signage taken care of, whether it was destroyed by the storm or it was part of the plan to change it out anyways in front of our toll plazas. And then finally, we had a discussion as we were doing some briefings about the timing of our lights. So currently right now we have 53 intersections that currently the detection system is down. We use different types of detection systems based on geometrics of the intersection, and the rough estimate cost per intersection is roughly between $20,000 and $30,000. So to replace all our detection system to make traffic move smoother is somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 to $2 million. If we did not want to seek reimbursement, there's an opportunity to get things done. It would cost us $1.5 to $2 million. And with that, if you don't have any questions, we will move on to permitting with Mark. Yep.
For the 1.5 million for the traffic signaling, if we wanted to move forward with that, what would be the timeline if that did occur? Would it be something within a few days or still months to get all that fixed before we see a change in the traffic patterns in the area due to the system failing?
I'm going to ask Rob Price to answer that question.
And also the second part, if we don't do that, leave it as it is for his approval, what's the timeline of getting all that 6 based upon the current approval process?
Yeah, so to order those detection systems, I'm going to guess we would have some of them that we could piecemeal together. We could start getting some of them up and running. Probably take us about 6 months to get them all fully functional. I think we could get some parts in the next couple months, and as they come, our vendors know that we've been reaching out and telling them we're going to have these orders coming, so they all know that. The process to get in front of Federal Highway, we are a week away from submitting back to the state. Once the state approves those assessments, it will go to Federal Highway. So we're expecting to be in front of Federal Highway within 2 weeks.
What's the timeline after you get in front of Federal Highway for response back for approval or denial?
It'll be similar because we're going to have to order the parts. We have to hire a contractor to do the work. We're asking Federal Highway for a reduced time frame for advertisement down to 14 days since we're still in a state of local emergency. But it'll take us probably a month to get a contractor on board.
Is it possible to order the parts now, either way that's funded, so we can obtain those, at least have that come in before we actually have to pay for it, or not?
Yeah, we can absolutely look into that.
That's something, I don't know if you guys want to talk about it here or what. So it's kind of like the baseball fields. Why not at least start that process? We're going to have to order if we fund it or if we get reimbursed from the Federal Highway. Why not go ahead and order the parts now, knowing we need it, instead of waiting longer and longer for it to kick the can down the road?
I think it's a great conversation to have because I think, when you drive around the county right now, clearly traffic is something that every single one of us hear about every single day. And the detection system, the advanced traffic management system did make a big difference, I believe, especially on roads like 41 and other roads where we could time the lights and at least get the traffic flowing all together. I think that'd be one, like you said, worth looking at trying to expedite.
Roger, is that something your staff needs direction from the board to do that, or something you guys will do on your own?
I think with your permission, I'm going to make the assumption that you all think it's a good idea. We're going to have some conversation about the best way to expedite the repair of that system. And if it's $1.5 million, my recommendation is going to be that we put $1.5 million at risk if we can get those things fixed sooner.
Agreed. But again, either way, like you just said, either way you fund it, you still got to order the parts and get the equipment. So why not go ahead and order it now and deal with the funding part later?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hit your button there. Perfect.
I've worked from Seattle, Midwest, to this coast here, so I'm talking to people every day in different parts of the country. And where our focus is here, and we're planning for here, and I agree, get these parts, but when I talk to them, they're doing the same thing. So the pressure on the supply system and the systems that we need, not just for here, they're from all over. And every time you turn on the TV, there's another issue somewhere. So I think the earlier we can get these done, get in line, get those things, the better.
And as Rob Price stated, we have been talking to our suppliers to ensure that they know what we're roughly asking for. But ordering those pieces of equipment, we will look into doing rather quickly and bring that back to the board.
Great, nice. Thank you.
But the other thing I would like to state is we did submit already to FDOT. FDOT, the plan, Rob said we're getting ready to submit again. That's the second time we're submitting. They sent back a list of questions that they wanted us to address, and they were essentially coming from Federal Highway because they went through the process at the same time we did. So that's the process. So we believe once we get through FDOT, it should be relatively smooth sailing with Federal Highway because we've answered most of the questions or concerns that they would have. And with that, we will go to permitting and Mark again.
Commissioners, the magnitude of the destruction Ian caused is definitely evident in the unprecedented number of permit applications that flowed through our permitting office since October 1st. I asked the team for an update on that first number of 30,866, and as of this morning, we have issued over 35,432 permits. I'll give you a quick breakdown of that 35,000 plus. 1,900 have been for interior remodels, over 1,300 have been for new homes, and over 14,000 have been for roofs. So you mix that in with just growth itself, you get the 35,000 permits. So it's been unprecedented since the storm hit. Going through those numbers there, 15,000 applications in process. That changes on a daily basis. We're keeping about even on intake and output. As far as phone calls are concerned, 800 calls a day come through the office. We have hired some temporary folks to help us field those calls or to retrieve voicemails and return the calls. 1,300 emails, that's typical for a really a busy day, and all of those are answered. None of them go unanswered, so our folks in DCD are working hard to respond. And in our lobby, we experience between 125 and 150 customers per day. If you take a walk over to the Public Works Department early in the morning, you'll see that crowd. So it's been quite unprecedented for us all. You know, knowing that there's going to be this backlog, our team didn't sit idle. They took the initiative to undertake quite a few actions here. A few have come forward to you for approval. But one of the things that they did is, even though the Public Works building was damaged during the storm, they opened up a temporary permitting office in the lobby of the admin building. We operated that for 2 weeks until we were able to return to the Public Works building. We waived permit fees for the first 3 months. We reinstituted them on January 3rd, and we've adjusted lobby hours to assist processing times, not only for people coming in, but also to allow our folks the time to process permits. We've established a temporary permitting location on Pine Island. That was for 3 consecutive Wednesdays. We've extended it into the month of March. We've added, with your approval, 11 new positions, which were approved on February 7th. We're lined up to hire 5 new folks here shortly, and still advertising for the other 6. We've really took a look internally to see how we can support our permitting department, and every facet of DCD has contributed employees to the effort, as well as temps, and we've also had light duty folks from other departments. We did make a call for mutual aid to all of our partners throughout Florida, and we did get some inspection assistance through Hillsborough County. We have contracted vendors that we are leveraging as well. And one of the other things that we did is we took a look at Excella, which is our automated permitting system, and identified ways we could look at how we can make that more automated and to streamline it. So those are all the efforts. We're continuing to look at ways that we can improve. We take a weekly bite at what things are bottlenecking us and what things can we do to make things better. So really proud of the community development team and the things that they've been doing here to address this unprecedented number of permit applications.
Commissioner Sandell, you got a question?
Mark, thanks for the update. Finding people and the right people today is always a problem. We approved those 11 positions. I think you said you've hired 5 or 6?
We're in the process of hiring 5 now, yes, sir.
So is that on pace with what we expect? The second thing is, I know we're looking through the Horizon Council at making some changes with leadership, you know, with the universities and so on and so forth. And maybe I'd like to get together with you and see how we can promote that through the Horizon Council, through the business environment, with the education piece, and let people know these opportunities, which I think would hopefully help us all.
Absolutely, Commissioner. We appreciate that.
I had a question on this slide. Do you have a sense of how many properties have tripped that 50% threshold?
I don't know that answer, Commissioner. I'm certain someone on our team is tracking that and can provide us that number. I don't know if Sean or Dave want to speak to that. The great thing is that we've really able to address that as far as property values are concerned, and I think that helped clarify a lot of the issues that we were seeing coming through the office.
Yeah. I know it was a big concern early on.
Good afternoon, Dave Loveland. So far, we've issued about 76 substantial damage letters, which are what are required for the 50% calculation.
Make sure he's got a microphone, please.
Okay.
We expect some more in the future as people are working through issues with their insurance companies.
So 76 so far then. So it seems as if early on, the actions that we took to, eliminate the look back and some of those things helped a lot of people out then, not meeting that threshold. Then. Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Ruane?
Just another point. I mean, I'm sure that Matt Caldwell can certainly give us some additional insight on assessments and properties of that nature. I mean, continue to go back and look to him to be a resource. I think there's a lot of issues that are out there relative to you. What do you do with your property? What are you allowed to do within the land development code? I think we're going to get into broader conversations because I know many people are just stagnant, not knowing what to do. Know they need to do something. Can they go up? How high can they go up? Those are conversations I think are going to stimulate that as well. But I'm working a lot with Matt just in trying to indicate the number of accessories that might be in that category. People report to him, I'm assuming you got catastrophic damage, so it's another
Absolutely.
theater use to us, so.
Good deal. Thank you.
Commissioners, that takes back to me for utilities. And when talking about our debris response, I compared Hurricane Ian to Hurricane Irma, and I just want to do the same now for a minute because you might recall that in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma, that was really an event that impacted us on the sewer side. Really widespread and long-term power outages rendered a lot of lift stations inoperable. And so our team was scrambling, trying to get those up and running. In the subsequent 5 years, the LCU team has acquired and installed generators routinely, annually, just as a part of the work plan, and that really paid off after this storm. And it's a good thing because it freed up resources for them to work on the 122 lift stations that were physically impacted, largely saltwater intrusion, ruining control panels, et cetera. And in terms of getting bypass pumps out there and all the things that had to happen to get those working, they just did a great job. And thanks also to our partners at FDEM who helped, as well as some other mutual aid parties. But I think most importantly, what that allowed is it freed up resources to respond on the water side. Because with the storm surge, that is really what happened in this event, was it impacted our water service. And I think maybe the thing to think about there is we got relatively lucky that we had 4 main breaks. That doesn't sound lucky, but for that magnitude event, it really was fairly fortunate. What happened, though, of course, is with the shifting ground, with the surge, the uprooted trees and vegetation, it tore up a lot of service lines connecting to individual residences and businesses. So the team has to get out there, locate all of those breaks, and either fix them or cap them because we're just pumping water to nowhere. And that's where you see the water pressure go down as we experienced. And so they did such a great job of getting out into the field, making that happen in short order, restoring pressure in the system, and then we had to go through, of course, the regulatory process of clearing the system and lifting the boil water notice. But they just did really phenomenal work on that. We've stabilized in terms of service accounts, so you see the 6,021 dormant accounts up there, which refers to those businesses or residences that really are in no position to receive service at this time because of the damage to their property. And that accounts for about $375,000 of revenue per month that the system is losing. But it's interesting to note that from landfall to now, we've added roughly the same number of new accounts just through organic growth. So it's pretty interesting in that regard. You can see the number on permanent repairs. I won't go too far into that. I'll just move on to the Fort Myers Beach system, both the water reclamation facility and the collection system. You can go to the next slide, Sam. Thank you. So in terms of the collection system itself, the team was able to restore pumping capabilities to all 21 lift stations within 2 weeks. So that obviously was very helpful. In the meantime, they've completed more than 300 demolition permit inspections of sewer laterals. That work continues and will for a long time. And then for the reclamation facility, again, just another great job of getting that facility, which was inundated with water, getting it back up and running. You can see the temporary repairs are going to be, well, that's actually a combination of temporary and permanent repairs, the $36 million. But ultimately, we do need to rebuild that facility, part of which includes hardening it, making it more resilient. And when you think about escalating construction costs and then the costs of hardening, that's a big number that we're going to have to crack there on the $209 million. Now go ahead, Sam, please. So for Matt Lachey, won't go into the details of all of the work that has been done out there, but you can see it is a lot. A quick thank you to our friends at Cape Coral Utilities who allowed us to tap into their services temporarily, but the team has restored permanent service to some of the area and is working on temporary service restoration to a few remaining properties, and so that will be an ongoing effort as well with the FDOT project that is taking place in that corridor. And that's the last slide, but I do just want to mention that going forward, we will try to draw down grant funds to do a number of projects that would make us more resilient, help us respond to future events. And so we've already talked about the Fort Myers Beach Water Reclamation Facility. That is a big resiliency effort, but we've also put in for grant funds to harden 300 lift stations. We're looking to secure and install some generators for our well fields, and there's a number of other projects like that as well. So that will be ongoing as well. Any questions about utilities? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, and we're going to transition to parks now. As you can see, out of our 114 parks that we currently have, all of our parks receive some level of sustained damage. The Parks and Recreation Department has the most identified damages in Lee County based on our FEMA Public Assistance Damage Inventory. The damage to the county parks and recreational areas are significantly greater than experienced during recent storms, including Hurricane Irma, and our current estimate for total damages is about $16.4 million. Mark will probably touch on the beaches in a couple of slides that are going to be coming up here shortly. But when you take a look at the overall damage between parks and recreation, natural resources, you're looking somewhere about $31 million in total damages.
So the goal of this video is to give our residents and our visitors an update on how we're progressing after Hurricane Ian. We want to give a 20,000-foot high-level overview of how our facilities are coming back in Lee County. All 114 Lee County parks sustained damage, and we're working very hard to get them back up and running so that residents can begin using them in some way. In the immediate aftermath of the storm, things were moving so quickly. We saw the governor of the state rebuild bridges in a matter of days. Now we're into the part where it feels like the grind. It's taking a little longer. And one of the reasons why is because the FEMA process actually is a very painstaking process to make sure you document and assess everything that was damaged so that you can receive full reimbursement in your county. So looking at the beaches, 35 miles are classified as having major erosion out of the 47 miles of shoreline that we have in Lee County. There's no easy answer about how long it'll take to get these facilities back open for the public. One of the things that we have to do is make sure that we make available every opportunity to receive reimbursement from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, known as FEMA, for our residents. The Lee County taxpayers couldn't bear the cost of rebuilding completely on their own. It's just too expensive. So we have to take part in the FEMA process, but doing that brings with it a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of red tape. So we've got to make sure that we dot our I's, cross our T's, turn all the reports in, and get all the inspections completed as we do the process. It makes it a little slower, but ultimately for the Lee County residents, it's the way it has to go. There's been a lot of progress in the first 6 months after the storm. We've gotten the vast majority of the debris picked up and hauled away. We've got many of our businesses that have reopened in the county, and we've also got many of our parks facilities, about 70% of them back open in some form. In fact, the public is so excited about this. We had a reach of over 140,000 people on our Facebook page when we made the announcement about Lakes Park reopening. If you want to find which parks are open, go to leegov.com and look for the interactive map that we've created that'll show you where parks are open and what's available at those parks. Lee County will be back. We will be better than we were before the storm, but it may not happen as fast as all of us want it to. Just know that everybody here at the county, many of us who suffered our own damage at our own homes, are working very hard to restore the county to the way it was before Hurricane Ian.
So Commissioners, the staff, the team over at Parks and Recreation has worked very closely with our friends over at DOT as well as procurement to get 95 of our 114 parks back open. We have 3 that are partially open, and so we only have 16 that are currently closed right now. And as Commissioner Hammond stated in the previous video, the website does have all of the updates for the closures, as well as what amenities may or may not be available at each of the parks. We'll put a few slides together here for you so that you can get a better understanding of the level of damages that were sustained throughout the system. So playgrounds and shade structures, many of these have been cleaned up and have been restored to some level. These are external building damages. Internal building damages, I'd also like to thank the facilities and construction management team, as they were instrumental in not only helping with the cleanup, but getting some of these indoor facilities and outdoor facilities back online. Tools and equipment. Our lighting, which we talked about this earlier today, and you voted on moving forward with getting that light system back up and running next week after daylight savings time. Our beaches, the board also made the beaches reopening a priority. On March 1st, the team was able to get Boca Grande Beach access and Dog Beach open, and then we were able to open Lynn Hall, Bunch Beach, Bonita Beach Park, and all of the beach accesses 1 through 10 at Bonita Beach open this past Saturday. We are working with CEPD to get the Allison Haggart Beach open next Saturday. And Bowditch and Crescent Beach. Bowditch right now is still being currently used, coordinating with Fort Myers Beach as a sand sifting site. So as we continue to work through that with the town of Fort Myers Beach, we'll continue to monitor as that program wraps up and then get to the cleanup of it. Crescent Beach is also currently closed. That was a previous site for sand sifting as well. There is a significant amount of debris, including a lot of glass in there, and the Parks and Rec team will be working with the Natural Resource team to put a plan together on how to finish cleaning that park up and making that more safe. So those are still TBDs, but we're certainly moving as quickly as we can to get all of those beach amenities open. I did want to point out that right now, everything that we have opened, we are not charging for parking. And we'll continue to have the website updated as these changes occur.
Commissioner, this slide gives us the magnitude of the waterborne debris that we are currently dealing with. As to date, we've collected over 434,000 cubic yards of wet debris. We have 43 crews working on this effort. Several vessels were stranded in waterways. As of date, 192 of the 230 waterway vessels have been removed. In the upland areas, 4 of 18. We still have 91 vessels that are still under investigation, mostly caught in the mangrove. Investigation as to who the owners are and the safest removal process. Also, environmental issues or concerns here are also being investigated. The shrimp trawlers caught some attention. 31 of the 38 have been processed. That means that they've been, if they are seaworthy, placed back in the water. If they were in need of repair, they were hauled off for repair, or if they were a total loss, they were removed from the property. So 31 out of 38 have been removed as of date. Waterway debris, there are 140 miles of natural creek streams that the county maintains, and I think Commissioner Hammond, you had made mention, we are still working through NRCS to determine whether or not they have funding to help us aid us to remove this from the waterway. So we have not heard back as of yet. Beach impacts, I think CV touched on it, and Commissioner Hammond's video also did as well. We have 47 miles of shoreline. 35 of those miles had major beach erosion. 11 had minor or moderate. I wonder where that one magical mile of beach is where it was untouched, but a majority has been eroded, and to the tune of $118 million. So that is the natural resources slide as far as waterborne debris and natural beach impacts.
So real quick, is that the number, that 118 million, is that the number we need to be asking for beach renourishment?
The last list that I saw for beach renourishment was around 75 million, so I think that covers some other expenditures as well.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner, you're correct. So a lot of these projects will be funded through a combination of federal and state programs as a matter of course. So I think what the Commissioner just articulated is what the current shortfall is, and so we have been supporting that ask, if you will.
Excellent. And that's whether it's in a city or unincorporatedly then? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's great.
Mr. Chair, may I also mention that the tidal waters are a state mission and not under the jurisdiction of the county. So we're working closely with them on that aspect of the job.
Good to know. Thank you.
Commissioners, we are closely monitoring and working on 3 distinct financial areas right now after the storm. First is cash flow and cost recovery. So all of the emergency work immediately following the storm and all the permanent damages that we will be doing now, the county has to pay for that. We have to cash flow that. It's all eligible for FEMA reimbursement, or the majority of it is, but we have to cash flow that and seek reimbursement then from FEMA. So what's very important is that we seek reimbursement as quickly as possible. That's why our disaster recovery consultant, Haggerty, is so key to this. So we seek reimbursement as quickly as possible, and we use our reserves and our line of credit for as little time as possible, especially, not so much so with reserves, but especially with our line of credit that has an interest rate attached to it. It's a variable daily rate. So we will have to use that. It's an eventuality, but we want to put that off as long as possible. And then when we have costs on that, we want to cycle them off of that line of credit as quickly as we can with reimbursement. The second area is current.
As a question.
I think it would be really helpful. I appreciate your comments, Pete, to say the least. But we talk about cash flow, we talk about cost recovery. I'd love to understand the reserves that we have, not just in the general fund, but other reserves that we have that might be appropriate that we could tap. Look at a going chart, okay? Cash is king. So we want to understand what reserves we have in the general, but then what reserves we might have in utilities or some of the other areas, solid waste, where we might be able to augment those as well. Just trying to get an overall big snapshot so we can make decisions, obviously, from a more comprehensive look. That's just a suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a comment on that, Pete, at all?
Yeah, we will do that, Commissioner, and I can actually give you some of those numbers on the next slide. I'll talk about that as we go through that. Then the next distinct area is current year revenue impact. So almost all of our revenues have been impacted by the storm. Most of them negative. Some have been impacted positive, but those you can count those on one hand. So we are monitoring those revenue impacts. There's a few of them that are the majority of what we project as our revenue losses this year, and they're different impacts, and they're in different funds. So as we go through the budget process, we will talk to you about that. But it's not like all of this is in the general fund. They're in various funds, so that's what we have to manage, is those revenue impacts, what fund they're in, and how we manage that. And then finally, our fiscal year 23-24 budget, which all of our fiscal managers, along with all of the Hurricane Ian work, are starting to develop right now. Commissioners, I send you this weekly, and your input is greatly appreciated. It's helped us tweak it some over the past several months, but this basically is a weekly dashboard of our cash inflows and cash outflows related to Hurricane Ian. So in the top left-hand corner, you can see the total revenues we've received in specific to Ian, our open encumbrances, those are the purchase orders that we opened up. And that number, we will not use that whole number. That was our best estimate at the time. And then our expenses paid to date. So if you look at the revenue, the second box there, our total revenue is $26.9 million related to Ian, and you can see that's broken out. We've received cash advances from FEMA of $20 million and insurance cash advances of almost $7 million. I can tell you that We have an additional $12 million of cash advances from FEMA that has been approved by FEMA and is at the state right now for approval. So that will bring that number up by $12 million to about $32 million from FEMA. And we also are expecting, on top of that, another $17 million in cash advances related to debris work. So when all is said and done, when we first got into this, shortly after the storm, we were expecting cash advances from FEMA of about $50 million. Then we've received almost $7 million of cash advances on insurance, and we're expecting another $10.5 million of cash advances. So that'd be about $17 million of insurance cash advances. So when you add that all together, that's about $67 million of cash advances. The board, y'all approved a line of credit of $150 million. It's a revolving line of credit last December. We have not used that yet, but if you add that on top of the $67 million, that's about $220 million of cash flow that we have access to. We will have to use some of that $150 million, but we're putting that off until we absolutely have to. So the right-hand side shows you on that $59 million of expenses paid to date where that's come from, and you can see the majority is solid waste. So, Commissioner Ruane, to your question, we received about $7.5 million of cash advance already, first debris pickup from FEMA, and then the balance of roughly $40 million has been taken from solid waste reserves. And we do have good solid waste reserves, our anticipated solid waste, which solid waste reserves also include what we're collecting for future capital projects. But in the short term, you can use that for a short term in order to cash flow these damages and then seek reimbursement. So our solid waste reserves are about $120 million, Commissioners. Our utilities reserves are about $87 million. And our general fund reserves, which is a last course of resort or action, is $98 million.
Pete, I think it's miraculous that we're 5.5 months through this and we obviously hadn't used a line of credit. So kudos to everything that you're doing. I'm just trying to look at a snapshot. So when you make a $120 million reference to utilities, we have the ability to be flexible. We look at what resources we have available. We make informed decisions. But if you ask me, when we decide to approve this $150 million, 5.5 months through it, would we have drawn on it? I'd be surprised to say we didn't. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your comments. But we will have to use it, but we're putting it off as much as possible. We've also applied for a community disaster loan through FEMA and the State Department of Emergency Management.
Pete, real quick, great information. I just want real quick for like the solid waste and for the reserves. Isn't that some of that have some bonding capacity? It's a limited bonding capacity, and also for future expansion of the landfill. So we have some outfunded liability for that. Just saying, so we don't forget about the future as far as that. And also utilities, we have a lot of limited bonding capacity because of future expansion of those facilities too.
So yes, we have and we will use reserves that were intended for capital projects. Once we start down that road of having to spend on the capital project, that's when we'll cycle those reserves onto the line of credit.
I just want to go, when we were, from 2 years ago, the study for solid waste, we had that the future burners coming on, the expansion of the solid waste facilities. I was make sure we don't lose any timelines on that, because we're going to be at capacity really, really soon with the increase of storm, because it's increased the, obviously, more consumption now, so we have more trash and debris. So making sure we stay on line with that.
Our intention will be that no timelines will be impacted by this.
Right.
Once we have internal discussions about that quite a bit.
And it doesn't affect the current funding. I'm doing a great job with the current funding. I'm just saying we got to make sure we stay focused on other stuff too. We don't want to lose and go backwards. And because of what happened with the storm, we want to make sure those other projects, including road projects, don't get delayed at all.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
I agree with Commissioner Pendergrass. I don't want to lose sight of what we have to do long term, but in the short term, manipulating cash flow is really important that we do, as long as we don't lose sight of the ability to obviously be prepared for the projects. But in a temporary world, it saves us interest expense.
Yeah. Yep, makes sense.
Commissioners, additionally, the state set aside $50 million for a loan program for communities impacted by Hurricane Ian, and we have a conference call this Thursday to talk with the state officials about that loan program and what the qualifications are for it. We've talked to Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel, and it's our understanding that they probably wouldn't need the full amount, so it's likely as a county we may, if we qualify, may go for some of that.
Just to follow up on that, when the legislature in the second special session allocated $50 million, it indicated if there was a need for greater capacity, by all means, they would refill that if that was needed.
Oh, excellent. Oh, that's good. Yeah, because do they have an interest rate attached to that, or is that an interest-free bridge loan?
The second one is interest-free.
Yeah. I mean, that obviously would be preferable then to hitting the line of credit where you'd be paying some interest. That makes sense.
Yeah, initially the intent was the cities, but as we explained to the legislators, it has a domino effect, obviously cities, and then it affects the counties as well. So I think the intent certainly is there to try to help. So I look forward to that phone call, and as we continue to go up to Tallahassee, just to make sure they understand the necessity for those things. And to your point, they're free.
And Commissioner, we'll be in contact closely with the cities on that, because our intention is to, what do you need? Because we wouldn't want to swoop in as the county and take up a lot of capacity that they need. That wouldn't be looked on favorably. But if they don't need it all, then and we qualify, we may go for some of that. That's an unknown at this point.
Gotcha.
Next slide. Then, so this is what we're cash flowing. This is not the DOT projects that Dave's talking about, or Glenn's going to talk a little bit about waterway cleanup, but this is everything else. This is all FEMA reimbursable emergency work, which the debris, which is Crowder Gulf and Thompson, and then emergency protective measures, which were, sheltering, temporary fixes of all of our buildings and facilities, operations at the EOC when we were activated. All that is included in that emergency protective number. And then you can see these numbers will change a little bit. Our final damage inventory is due to FEMA today, and we have it all buttoned up for FEMA, but you can see then how the other, everything below the emergency protective measures is basically permanent fixes, and you can see where the majority of the damage dollars are. Utilities is a big one. Parks and Recreation, as CB said, the Beach Pier, Lynn Hall, Matlacha. There's 150 line items of damage for parks. Natural resources, of course, with the beach erosion, Bonita Beach and Lovers Key particularly. And Lee Tran, that's the Fort Myers Beach Park and Ride. And facilities, so a large part of the facilities, or a big part of the facilities is our Public Works building, which flooded. Are there any questions on that side, Commissioner? Next, and we, yeah, so. The next slide then, Commissioners, is the other area that we're monitoring, which is lost revenues. This is lost revenues that we know of, that we actually lost the revenues because we weren't charging a toll or a fare or whatever. And then it's also a projection to the end of September, our fiscal year, based on what we think activity will be like as it was impacted by the hurricane. We did this projection. All the departments and all the fiscal managers work with us on this projection. We did one in November, another one in January, and we're doing it every other month. So we'll do another one later this month. That's a big number you see at the bottom, 66 million, but a majority of that is in tourist taxes. And the tourist taxes have been hit hard. I do want to say that we have $73 million of reserves in tourist taxes. And then tolls. We know for a fact that we lost, just based on year over year and us not charging tolls on the bridges for either a couple months or 3 months, we lost about $5 million of known. And then the projection forward is based on what we think the activity will be. These numbers will change in the next iteration you see this month. I think some of these numbers will come down as we get more and more information.
Commissioner Ruane?
Sure, thanks, Chairman. So yeah, that, again, going back to the point, the biggest numbers you can see on that is VCB. Again, looking at the reserve of $73 million, it obviously gives us some comfort. The other thing with DOT is I'm just curious how much is revenue that we didn't receive as a result of tolls that we weren't collecting, and then I don't know if there's any impact with that number with the rebate program that was put in by the governor. And then the last item, which is probably the only positive side, would be sales tax. I'd be really curious on what that's trending with all the artificial stimulation money that's in there. So I'd like to think that's a positive number.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, Commissioners, Pete, with the reduction in tourist tax collection, do we see any issues with covering debt service for the stadiums?
No.
Okay, thank you. Then on our ad valorem collection, what's our current rate of collection compared to last year at this time? Do you know?
Yes, we collected through February 90.4%, and last year through February we were 93.6%, so about 3% less.
3% off.
Now, what doesn't show on here, Commissioners, I don't have property tax revenues. That's something we'll have to monitor closely because I know people seeking rebates, they have to apply to the property appraiser by April 1st, and then he will certify that. So I don't know what the final number will be, but when we do have that final number, our intention is to work with the state on making sure that we're made whole on those rebates.
Follow-up question, Pete. You've been here long enough. Was there ever a time during our economic downturns, you've been here a long time, we ever really went below the 5% uncollectible, greater than 5% uncollectible for ad valorem taxes?
No, we've always basically budgeted 95% and received 96%. Now, during the downturn, of course, we were losing hundreds of millions of dollars in property taxes just based on the decrease in the tax base. But we've always collected basically 1% more than we've budgeted.
And correct me if I'm wrong, there's still a sales tax certificate program that would take place in June for property taxes that were not paid by the end of May. Is that still in effect?
I assume it is.
So property tax certificates are ones, when real estate taxes aren't paid, they go out to the general public and you have the opportunity to bid on those and pay those. You then own that certificate. So if I didn't pay my real estate taxes, an individual could actually pay the real estate taxes. They would have a lien on my home. It would accrue interest. It was a very common technique used in other states I lived in. I was just curious to clarify that. So another way to get you to the 100%.
And the other question I was going to have, if I'm remembering right, the way the property tax rebate program works for the folks who are going to apply for it, they have to pay their taxes first and then actually seek that reimbursement from the state or that rebate from the state. So that could actually help our collections in a way because we'll get the paid taxes and then the state's the one that's actually going to provide the reimbursement or the rebate? Is that, no, we'll still provide the rebate?
Right.
Okay.
Commissioner, one last. Commissioner, with the property tax collection rate as it is, during this current budget cycle for the next fiscal year, I don't think we need to be terribly concerned about ad valorem taxes collected to fund all the operations they normally fund. It will be the year after that we need to be thinking about because we don't know what's going to happen to property values as of January 1 of 2024. And so the property appraiser will determine what those values are based on everything that happened in 2023.
I mean, I agree, County Manager, there'll be a drop in property values. The other thing that is somewhat masked is that many of the mortgages that are held, both residential and commercial, are paid escrows at the end of the year. Most banks give a 6-month moratorium. So Ian happened in September, gave you 6 months not to pay your mortgage. So when December came at the end of the year, they had to settle up the escrow. They would have did that for the year of 22. 23 in November, you may not have the same type of situation. If you have a mortgagee that has not paid their mortgage for 15 months, if it's highly leveraged, the bank may not be paying that escrow. So I agree with your comments, City Manager. I've seen that, County Manager, I've seen that occur.
Gotcha.
Commissioners, yeah, just one point that clarification, and I may need Glenn's help on this, but I believe right now that the tax collector is the one who's going to be rebating the property taxes, and that's why we're working on our legislative agenda to make sure that the state would make us whole on that. Because if they hold those tax revenues back, we won't be receiving them. We'll have to be made whole by the state.
I remember my early conversations when we went during the special session to Tallahassee and talked with, you know, the Speaker of the House and even the Senate President and that they were hoping to hold us harmless, basically, to not charge us for those. But
I agree, Commissioner Hammond, that, and then the testimony that I gave was the intent certainly to hold us harmless. Initially, we were hopeful they were going to administer it, those rebates, but we were certainly going to be held harmless as a result of that, and had assurances in the second session. But you're right, in our conversations, that's what they assured us in the first session.
Okay, so we'll keep on that. That's obviously on our legislative agenda, and we'll continue to work on that through this session. Okay, that makes sense.
Yes, sir. That's a good segue. So we can hop into just a reminder of what the asks are, and I'll go through this pretty quickly. But in the first two categories for public assistance, given the way things are shaping up right now, we would expect that the state would pick up any non-federal match that's required. They had appropriated funds during the special session. Assuming we go to a 90-10 cost share, we should be well positioned. But to Commissioner Ruane's point, if any of those assumptions change, we will, of course, go back to the well and ask them to increase that allotment of funds. The DOT repairs, we've talked about this. This is primarily, of course, the Sanibel Causeway and the Matlacha corridor. We have asked the state to pick up the non-federal share there. That's a significant chunk of money, so we'll see what they can come up with. And we'll keep working that, and perhaps we could even ask our congressional delegation to help if we don't get all of the money from the state. On the beach restoration, you covered this one, Commissioner Hammond. The ask county-wide is much bigger than this, and we track that as well. But for our specific projects that are in the hopper right now, we need an additional $6.4 million to cover projects at Lover's Key and North Bonita Beach, and so we have filed those requests. The waterway cleanup, we've talked about it a little bit today. National Conservation Resource Service has sent us a letter saying they don't have funding currently available for this effort. That said, they have not denied our application. So without that formal denial, we can't yet go to FEMA and seek reimbursement. So that is the issue that we've been pursuing with our congressional delegation, trying to get some help on that. But we're asking everybody who will listen so that we can keep ourselves in position to find money wherever it might be possible to get some. So we have asked the state legislature for it. If any of these other avenues come through in the meantime, that could always be withdrawn. But as of right now, we don't have funding for that effort. We've asked for lost revenues for the October, November, December time period for under both tolls and Lee County utilities. And what we did is we just mirrored what the legislature did for ad valorem rebates. We've asked for the same time period, and we would expect going forward in a future session, we would probably be continuing those asks based on actuals. So we're not projecting, but we can show the legislature what actually happened and what we would need to make us whole. With the ad valorem rebates, you've already talked about it. It is the case that people have to pay their taxes, apply for the rebate, That application is due April 1st. I believe the property appraiser has through June to process and certify those refunds, so we won't have a definitive number right away, but if he's able to give us a not-to-exceed number, I think we can go to the legislature and make that ask, as you've indicated here, asking them to keep us whole. A couple of the municipalities have heard in the last week or so that the bridge fund is intended to help with this, but I think we've all heard what you've articulated, which is we would hope that they would actually make us whole on this and not hold us responsible for lost ad valorem taxes. And then finally, on the hazard mitigation grant program, I do want to point out I've somehow gotten the number wrong there. It's the total allocation for county-wide projects is $339 million and change. $334 million, thank you. So we won't know how much, we don't have an estimated cost there yet because we don't know which Lee County government specific projects will be awarded. But once they are, the legislature has also indicated a potential desire to create a pool of matching funds for hazard mitigation grant projects. We won't really need those matching funds until the state's fiscal year 24-25. So we're projecting that to be an ask, a formal ask of the legislature the next legislative session. It is one of your current legislative priorities, gearing up to that, but we would have a definitive number probably to give them in the 2024 session. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Thanks, Glenn. Really appreciate it. Everything on this list, obviously, we have made sure we've advocated, and certainly in my testimonies up in Tallahassee, we have the 21.5. If we get some more granular detail, that would be really helpful. That's probably the only number that I can say we didn't peel back as far as in any of my testimonies.
Okay. Yes, we can show you a map of all the waterways and
yeah, well, any type of details that I can give to, obviously.
We'll create a leave behind for you, Commissioner.
Great. Thank you.
Commissioners, this slide here is to give some type of understanding as the timeline as it relates to a number of these programs that we've already discussed. The damage to our communities from Hurricane Ian was historic, and our long-term recovery process will be a multi-year effort, but significant progress continues to be made. Pete has talked about the public assistance process and the approximately $300 million worth of damages to Lee County through also debris, emergency repair work, as well as our long-term permanent fixes and permanent repairs. Glenn's touched upon, and we talked about a little bit earlier in the presentation, the hazard mitigation grant program. Those applications are going to be due in May. The county has identified 16 projects for us to move forward with, and those grant applications are being developed strategically so that the county can seek funding from other grant programs to assist with covering the local cost share to minimize the long-term cost to the county, in conjunction to what Glenn just spoke about as far as asks at the legislative session next year. The projects that have been identified are based on the previous board's strategic goals and priorities, and from your previous discussions, shelter generators, infrastructure projects. Glenn touched on a number of those through utilities, retrofitting some of our county-wide structures, as well as flood mitigation and resiliency projects, just to give you an idea of what those programs look like. And then we are expecting a notification on the CDBG-DR, which is the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program. These are disaster dollars specifically that follow the same model as the day-to-day Community Development Block Grant, Community Development Block Grant funding. And the disaster recovery dollars are meant to address unmet disaster recovery needs arising from such disasters as Hurricane Ian. We've previously communicated to you before that our very rough estimate is about $500 million for Lee County. Please know that that is just an estimate. that we've worked together with our team, our emergency management consultant, Haggerty. So 70% of that is to go specifically to low and moderate income needs, and 30% of that can go to urgent needs, which may include infrastructure type projects. And as I mentioned, we do expect an announcement in the next couple of weeks. But if you look at the permanent fixes and repairs, the HMGP and the CDBG-DR, these are longer-term grant programs that will go well beyond the 5-year mark.
Chris, on the HMGP, I mean on the CDBG-DR dollars, what we're estimating at $500 million right now, what kind of timeline do we have to work with for recommendations back to the federal government?
That's a great question. That's a very fast turnaround timeline. We've got about 120 days from the time that notice is given. You have to have a community engagement piece to that, where the community gets to talk about, what things are important to them. From that feedback and from feedback from the community, a plan gets put together, an action plan gets put together, and then once the action plan is drafted, then there is another public comment period. So all of those things are supposed to take place within that 120 days. The county does have the ability to ask for an extension, but when it comes to disaster dollars, until you actually have the approval for extension, we have to plan on that 120-day window.
So, Commissioners, my purpose for asking that question is to just sort of put everyone on notice that we're going to be working on a very short timeline. I have no doubt that the Long-Term Recovery Task Force will play a role in the public engagement portion, and they'll have lots of conversation about those dollars. But then there'll be another piece to it where Haggerty, our consultant, will be helping us with the process to make sure we get all of that done on time so that we don't miss out on being able to use those dollars.
Yeah. What's just popped up on the screen now is a number of other potential grants. Mark Mora mentioned a number of these during the housing. These are certainly not an all-inclusive list of grants that are being monitored and or applied for, but it is an idea of what is currently being worked on right now. And then this slide here, I'm going to ask Katie Welton, who's our Community Engagement Director for Digital Media. Commissioners, we have the Community Engagement team, our IT and GIS team, as well as all of the departments have worked on creating a community engagement tool that will be available on our website with our other community engagement tools, such as our resident information and our CIP. This is a GIS hub. Katie's going to go through some of the highlights for this. This is already live and active on our website as of this afternoon. There is a lot of information in here. We encourage everybody to go through, take a look at it. As always, these are works in progress. We continue to add and we continue to improve upon it as we continue to move forward. So with that, Katie, if you can just give a few highlights.
Sure, definitely. As Chris mentioned, this is meant to be a one-stop shop for all of this information, and it was truly a one-org effort. I have to give a shout out to our GIS, Innovation and Technology, and the rest of our community engagement team who all came together to put this together with our Haggerty partners, and then all of the departments who answered all of my calls asking for data repeatedly. So I'll scroll through the homepage and give you a brief overview. And then we hope you, as Chris said, dive in. We start off really reminding people of what happened to our community and explaining the difference between unincorporated and incorporated Lee County, because a lot of the information relates to certain parts. So that was really key through the whole site and making sure that was clear what area we were talking about. The homepage that I'm scrolling through is really the high-level overview. And then as we go through each section, Up at the top are the tabs that delve further into each section to give you more detail. So we won't go into all of those, but please know that you can delve into those and find all of this deeper information. We start with the damage assessment, and we really try to not only include numbers in this site and data, but also show graphically the impacts that our community has had from the storm. We divided the community out by planning districts. So you can go through the planning districts, and you can either scroll through at the top or click through to the one you're most interested in, and there's a gallery of images related to that district that you can scroll through, as well as the damage by numbers for that district. So they can look through the pictures or see those numbers. We then go into the progress summary, which is a snapshot of the assistance programs we've coordinated through local, state, and federal partner agencies that mostly focus on housing, individual assistance, public infrastructure assistance, small businesses, and more. And we've really made a point throughout the site to try and define all of our industry terminology so that it's understandable for the public. We all use it every day, and for most people, those aren't day-to-day terms. So we have several spots where that's available. And as you can see, there's a plethora of data, but if you view the dashboard, it actually gives you the high-level summary and then goes even further into detail with more timelines, further data, and you'll see that there's numbers next to some of the titles. We're trying to make sure everything's extremely transparent. So at the bottom, we have footnotes of the sources where all the data is being pulled. So if there are questions, every number we have the source for. And thanks to our Haggerty partners, we also have a database in case we get calls where we can go look for a specific number and tell exactly where that data came from. Here we give a high-level overview of the assistance from FEMA and SBA, as well as survivor housing. And these three blocks relate back to these top tabs, where you can get in more detail in all of those areas.
In there and actually physically update it.
We physically update it. We're scheduled to update this once a month is the plan at this point. And in the footer of the page, we
Do you, on the SBA, I'm just curious, did they provide us, so they talk about the amount of applications they've taken in, they even talk about how much they've approved. Did they give us a number of how many they've dispersed? No? It's okay if they didn't. I'm interested. Yeah.
We've had the disbursement, we've had a lot of conversations with SBA about that because although my understanding is, and somebody chime in if I'm wrong, but is that just because they've approved dispersal of a certain amount doesn't mean people have to take that amount of the grant. So it's a harder number for them to report.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'll just tell you, commissioners, obviously no secret that I also work with the Chamber of Commerce. So there's a thing called the Southwest Florida Alliance of Chambers. It's where like the CEOs of the different regional chambers, the Cape Chamber, the Fort Myers Chamber, the Bonita, and all of them get together on a phone call. Well, between all of us, we did a survey, and not a single one of our members has reported receiving the money. While they've reported being approved, they hadn't reported receiving any money. And it's interesting because I believe that they're funding loans for individual households, because I see that disbursement money. I don't know if they're getting to the businesses. And so the Alliance of Chambers had a call with the Small Business Administration officials last week in Washington, and it was organized by Aaron from Senator Rick Scott's office. And so the net of the call was the SBA officials actually acknowledged on the call that they recognize there's a problem there, and they would get back to us on data and what they're going to be doing to fix it and try and get that money dispersed quicker. But I thought that was a good call. The Sanibel Captiva Chamber, I think, has done a great job, John Lai out there, of really following his members through the process. Because if you look at the business community on Sanibel, clearly devastated, and it's been a really tough road for a lot of those businesses who've applied for the loans.
And as we scroll down the page, we have a section dedicated to the damage assessment Pete mentioned during his time. The pie chart shows the overall cost for repairs to the county estimated, and then it's divided out by section. So if you're, for example, want to know about natural resources, you can click on that piece of the pie, and it will give you the estimated cost as well as descriptions of the projects. For debris, we give a high-level overview of the status of the debris collection. And then we also link to our current debris website, which is regularly updated, and the Thompson Debris Dashboard, which gives you the collection statuses. And again, all of these click through, especially the debris or Parks and Recreation, to these tabs at the top with more information. The Parks and Beaches gives you a high-level overview of the number open, partially open, and closed parks. And then links into the Parks and Beaches section, which goes into the progress map, showing the map that tells all the amenities that are open and closed. It gives the beach opening timeline and all of the information that can be found in that regard. And finally, we have the Lee County Public Works section, which addresses a lot of the traffic signals and roadway repairs, as well as permitting. If you click into that section, it gives you the top questions asked about the 50% rule. It talks to you about the number of permits issued and links you where you can find the status of your permit, as well as who to call if you need help. And we link back to all of our partners who, if you need more assistance, can find them there as well. We also made sure to add that this data is updated on a monthly basis, and we put when it was last updated. And the goal is to update it at the end of each month so it's consistently updated. And we work with our Haggerty team to update all that information and make sure all the numbers are matching everywhere. The site is ever-changing resource, so as more needs arise, we can update it, add to, and take away to whatever meets the need of the commission and the public and our staff. And it is, as Chris mentioned, it's now featured in our community engagement tools on our website, as well as on the top header image. And then you can visit it directly by visiting inprogress.legov.com. Thank you.
Great job, Katie. Thank you.
Well, I think this was a great recap of where we were, where we are, and I think it's even a good glimpse of where we're going to be over the next 6 months. I think we did a great job earlier today of listening and responding to the community on the lights situation. I think we've done a great job getting those beaches open this weekend that we got open, and the one that's scheduled for next weekend as well too. I mean, that's just. It's fantastic to see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that while we were so badly damaged, and I think this was such a good recap of how far we've come in 6 months and how bad it was initially. For many people, I think now, almost 6 months later, I'd say probably about 80% of the community is back to where they were. People are going to school, people are going to work, people are out, supporting businesses and things like that. Even spring training's happening, but it is still really a reminder of where the barrier islands are and the coastal communities are right now. And I'm just really, I'm thrilled to see that we haven't taken our eyes off of that we're going to continue to work to get funding to try and rebuild those communities and help them get back to where everybody else is.
Mr. Chair, Dave, did you have one last point?
Yeah, I believe we have one more video regarding that.
Light it up.
The creation of a Lee County Recovery Task Force is based on a national disaster recovery framework provided by Homeland Security, as well as by evaluating lessons learned from the most catastrophic events in Florida and the nation. These include Hurricane Michael, Hurricane Irma, California fires, Hurricane Katrina, and many more. Through public engagement, strategic planning, and the identification of emerging and long-term needs, the task force will work together to develop innovative and resilient solutions to support the rebuilding of Lee County in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian. The goal is to help Lee County gain needed resources to rebuild and emerge even stronger than ever. The task force is made up of community representatives and provides a unified voice to advocate for the county to the state and federal leaders. The task force is here to be responsive to legislative leadership requests. It also provides the opportunity to be more competitive for regional disaster recovery grants through collaboration, multi-jurisdictional planning, and help a loud voice in the disaster recovery funding process. By working together as one community, we're able to build a compelling, comprehensive regional plan with broad-based public engagement inclusive of local priority. The collaboration also allows increased public-private, nonprofit community partnerships and innovative ideas for recovery and rebuilding. This will be achieved through the task force high-level process for long-term recovery planning that centers around guiding principles of listening, analyzing, and developing solutions. The task force will assess the impact of the community and develop a master plan from the assessment, themes of the needs identified along the potential funding sources. And by December 2023, an overall recovery and resilience plan will be presented. Through the entire process, public engagement and input will be kept top of mind and is crucial to the success of the project. Lee County's Recovery Task Force is committed to working on behalf of the community, build back, and bring Lee County back better than ever. For more information on the task force, visit resilientlee.org.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Commissioners, I think we all probably have a better understanding about why this is called long-term recovery. When you take a look at the grants timeline, for example, the major grants and the major dollars that are going to make their way to Lee County over time is on at least a 5-year schedule, and we'll probably go longer than that. As the chair just said, about 80% of Lee County, people walk out their front door and life seems absolutely normal. But it's that other 20% that was so devastated, and that's what's going to take such a long time to get to full recovery. And with all the work that's been done so far, first of all, thank you to the senior team and GIS team, Katie, and everybody who put this presentation together. It really is a good reminder of, sort of the condition that that currently exists. All the work that's being done during recovery is at the same time that we're still providing service at a fairly high level otherwise. And, growth continues. The number of new building permits being issued for Lee County construction projects hasn't slowed down even a tiny bit. Traffic continues to be an issue. So all of these projects that we have in the capital plan for the next 5 years, and particularly the first tier, the Tier 1 roadway projects, are really, really important to continue the effort that we've started. I have some takeaways here that I'd like to run by you real quick, and if you agree, these are things that we need to bring back to you. Please just tell me yes, or if not, that's okay too. Commissioner Pendergrass talked about the Gulf Coast landfill closure timing, and I think what we probably need to do is do some more work with the state and understanding their timeline, Commissioner, so we can tell the residents with a little more specificity when they can expect to see that thing closed up. The traffic signal repair and the timing system, we want to see if there's a way to better expedite all of that while not risking reimbursement from the federal agencies. Commissioner Sandella, you mentioned working with FGCU and the Horizon Council to try and help provide qualified people, particularly in our community development program where we need planned reviewers and inspectors and such. Commissioner Wayne, you mentioned the LDC amendments that would allow people to rebuild their homes and other buildings with some changes in limitations. Is that something that you want us to pursue going forward from today, or is that take it up later after the task force does more work?
I think as the task force does more work.
Okay. Yep. Fort Myers Beach water treatment plant, or utility plant, about a $200 million rebuild proposition. I think that's something that, as we work towards better understanding the cost and a timeline, we're going to want to come back with a workshop to talk with you about that, because that's a huge sum of money, and it's a monster project. And then, Commissioner Ruane, you asked about an additional report on all the reserves to determine what would be available for recovery if we needed to spend it, including some work around not slowing down any of the capital projects that those current reserves are being scheduled for.
Correct.
Yes, okay. And those are my takeaways. Did I miss anything?
Now, you know, the only thing I wanted to ask for clarification was on the $209 million water treatment plant. Is that functioning now, though? Were we able to get it back up and running?
Yes, sir, it is functioning, not at full capacity, but it's doing the job. And, you know, it was slated for reconstruction even prior to the storm. But now with the additional needs that were called to the fore because of water inundation, we have some additional resiliency measures we need to undertake.
Excellent. Is part of the evaluation on that one, and I guess like you said, we'll need a workshop on it. I mean, is part of the evaluation moving the actual plant to a different location that might be higher ground and then piping the, you know, effluent or whatever it is, the product that we're treating there to the plant? I mean.
Well, that has been evaluated, yes, sir. Because of the service area and the land that's available and the elevation throughout the entire service area, there really aren't any good relocation options. So you just sort of have to elevate the mission critical, like electrical, et cetera, those components.
Gotcha.
And otherwise harden them.
I think those are the concerns when you augment what we have to raise. There's going to be some things that we're going to really have to address. We're going to have a higher priority from a public safety, but more a public resource that we provide. So we're going to have to do some things pretty quickly. I'm sure that reclamation, since it's in the spot, we're going to have to get some resiliency, and to get that, we're going to have to go up.
Yeah.
No ifs, ands, ors.
So, Commissioners, I don't know that we've ever thrown this much information at you at once in a single workshop. This is overwhelming for any one person to understand all these moving parts. That's why we have the team that we have. But if you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate. I know the general public ask you all about a lot of these things when you're out in the community. You know, we're happy to provide any information you need based on your speaking engagements or other questions you may have that make their way to your offices. So, Commissioners, with that, Dave, senior team, any Commissioners?
I'd like to thank both Chris and Dave. Their weekly updates have really been helpful. And I guess if we have questions, to your point, Mr. County Manager will address those. So when we have that weekly meeting, if there's an item we need additional information, but I find them to be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Sandelli.
First of all, thank you, everybody. The numbers are staggering. The projects are beyond anything I can comprehend. Never want to single one person out or a group out, but I spend a lot of time driving around, and Doug Whitehead and his team has done a phenomenal job. It's probably the biggest line item that we have, at least to date. Mm-hmm. The other thing, it's a visual. And so when you go by, whether it's us or whether it's the community, they see the progress of these sites being cleared, you know, and I think that's a small element of getting back to normal. It looks a little bit normal, you know. There's some things out here, but, and if you have an issue, call Doug and his team, and then whether it's their jurisdiction or helping us direct it, we can make a difference with that. So you hate to single somebody out, but because of the enormity of that and the team, I wanted to say thank you.
Good deal. Well, is there any further business before us? All right, anybody else? Oh, Commissioner Pendergrass.
Roger, are we, so the area, the one of the slide we had earlier showed the cities that were involved in the hurricane, shows the unincorporated area, that shows the cities of Town from Merchant Beach, Sanibel, Cape Coral, Bonita. So all those different municipalities, I know we're having some communication with them, but do we know if they're keeping up, for example, Town of Florida Beach as far as permitting goes? So everything, all their zoning, permitting, everything, we know what goes on, but the outside public doesn't understand. When somebody contacts me, their issue with permitting or they have an issue with the city of Cape Coral, for example. Do we know, are we tracking to see if they need any help or how they're doing as far as through permitting, zoning, code enforcement, and utilities? Because I know we have our big projects overall, county roads that go through Stroh Boulevard, for example, to the beach, but Are we in communication with those cities too?
Commissioners, we are in communication with the cities on a regular basis. I don't know how finitely we can report on, their workload and how well they're doing with it, and whether or not they need help, unless Dave or any of you know differently than what I've just said.
Just wondering because, like, if you look at the map, the areas are mostly devastated. We're all municipalities. The city of, Cape Coral, the town of Forest Beach, and Sanibel, along the coastline of Bonita. So, we were, had devastation across the county, but in different loads. But I was just wondering how they're doing it. I hear a little bit here from their councils and different members of the cities, but I just didn't know if we're in communication with them.
Yes, sir. And well, in addition to what I just told you, on the 23rd of this month, at least that's the tentative date, I'll be meeting with all the city managers, so we can have the conversation about where are you, how you doing, what do you need, all those sorts of things.
Thank you.
And Roger, just one real quick thing for utilities in particular. Pam Keys and her team and myself and their town manager, we've offered continual assistance on the utility side, just as one specific example.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, if there's no further discussion or conversation, then we're adjourned. Thank you.